Welcome to another edition of Altitude Advantage. I am your team reporter and host, Elisa Hernandez. Across the table from me, we have our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric, DiLalla. We are fresh off of Super Bowl week. I guess we can say that the 2024 season is officially over now that Super Bowl is behind us. And it's just us two here in the podcast studio. No Suze. Shout out to Big Suze, but you know.
She left us. Thanks a lot, Suze.
But we had a really fun time out in New Orleans. We'll get into that a little bit. You know, recapping all the excitement from down there. Pat Surtain obviously winning Defensive Player of the Year, which was very exciting. And then just looking ahead to what's to come over the next few weeks. It's off season, so I know that Broncos country is hungry for some content. So we are back here. And New Orleans, Super Bowl week. It was fun down there.
Yeah, that's I've been to 3 or 4 or 5. I don't know, you kind of lose track at some point of like how many different cities you go to for NFL honors. But
Light flex.
New Orleans, yeah, exactly. New Orleans, man, I thought they did a great job. It was really fun to be down there. Everything's so close. The food is really good. Obviously, the culture down there is terrific, and the convention center, from our perspective, huge, lots of space, but it's like situated really nicely. And yeah, I think you've seen a lot of media people the last couple of days say, let's go back there every year. And I certainly would be in favor of that, of going back as much as possible. They did a great job. We ate well all week, and it was fun to be down there and see some of the guys. And the Broncos were a little bit more of a topic of conversation than they have been the last couple of years. So nice to be relevant, nice to kind of be in the conversation. And, of course, to see Pat win Defensive Player of the Year. You know, we hoped that was going to happen, but still I was sitting there in the little media room and my fingers were crossed as they were announcing it. And I was like, please don't have done all this work for no reason.
I can confirm that is true.
And really excited for him. He was really gracious with his time afterwards. And I said this to Pat. I said this to Champ. I said it to a couple other people as well. Pat Surtain has every reason. He's good enough. He could be a diva if he wanted to, you know. And he is just incredibly nice, incredibly kind, really generous with his time. He gets it. And I really appreciate that about Pat. So just wanted to kind of say that publicly, that for people who you've seen him on TV, you've seen him running interceptions back 100 yards, but maybe you don't know type of guy he is A+ in that category as well.
Well, I think when you look at the caliber of player that he is, when he won, he said that he was also he was nervous sitting in the crowd as well. So you always think they always say we work hard not for the individual accolades, but when you're at the pinnacle of that, to become just the second Broncos in franchise history to win Defensive Player of the Year, the first cornerback since 2019 to win that award. It's like once you're in the moment and you're there. We talked to him on the red carpet before. Obviously, he showed off his outfit, always dressed to the T, one of the best dressed on the team for sure. You kind of see the full circle moment for him. And he had mentioned that New Orleans was special because, he has a lot of family from there. He visited there a lot as a kid. He, grew up around that area. So I always like those full circle moments, being a kid and obviously wanting to get to the pinnacle of the Super Bowl, obviously. But being in that NFL honor station, being honored like that, knowing his dad played in the league, he mentioned following that blueprint. And so for him to kind of get that award in front of so much of his family in New Orleans, I thought was really special. And he's a hungry guy. He's already ready for next season.
Yeah, I think if you take a step back, and we did so much content around Pat,
make sure you check it out
that week. So if you haven't, seriously, if you haven't had a chance to go look at all that stuff, whether it's the video that his dad narrated or the video game kind of deal that we put together, or your interview with Pat, or us talking about Pat after he won, everyone should go check all that out. There's a lot of stuff there that
a lot of good quotes from him.
I think we posted 10 videos within an hour. So a lot of good stuff that people may have missed. But one of the things that stands out to me with Pat is I think we said this a couple weeks ago, people are watching prime Champ Bailey right now, you're watching a guy who's on the path to the Hall of Fame be the best, not just at his position, but maybe in the league. And I just hope that people are kind of recognize the kind of special nature of what we're seeing. It's the same way that when Vaughn was playing at the peak of his powers, 2015, 2016, when he was really rolling, or Peyton Manning, in 2013, people should this doesn't happen all the time, right? And so I hope people recognize that. And you talk about winning in front of his family. He's already tied his dad in Pro Bowls. He's just been in the league for 4 years.
Yeah.
And I do think when you look at what he's done, it's starting to be historic. And you talk about guys, and I mentioned this right after Pat won, guys who have won Defensive Player of the Year and had 2 All-Pros in their first 4 years of being in the league. Only 10 guys have ever done that. And he's the first corner to ever do that. And you're talking about guys like Reggie White, Lawrence Taylor, Cortez
iconic
Kennedy.
names.
You're talking
like
about
iconic names in the league.
Yeah. And so J.J. Watt, like you're talking about Hall of Fame guys. And when you talked to Champ Bailey, he was saying, okay, he's got to keep it going. Like, let's see what he's got next. What does he do for the next 3 or 4 years? But for where he is now, like Pat Surtain has positioned himself to be in the conversation as one of the all-time greats, to get a gold jacket. And when we were down there, I was kind of like, this is cool to be a part of.
Yeah.
And to 20 years from now, if he's getting inducted in Canton or whenever it would be, like, to be able to look back and say, like, we were there when he got his Defensive Player of the Year, that's pretty cool and pretty special. So, I know that night meant a lot for him, but you're right. Hey, can you go win 2 Defensive Players of the Year? Like, I don't know that I ever expected him to do this, just because it is so hard for a corner to win, and it kind of has to be this perfect storm of, like, if a guy gets 20 sacks, the voters are probably going to give it to him just because sacks are like
they're flashy.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a sexy stat that voters pay attention to, but you've got to be like as good as Pat, where he was number 1 in all these categories. You also have to have enough interceptions. You also have to have the big play that, like, they can show this 100-yard pick six and be like, this is the moment. Yeah. And so I don't know if I ever thought that it would happen. And that doesn't mean, I still think he's going to get first team All-Pro after first team All-Pro and load up on those, because you just have to be the best at your position. But to get voters to pay attention, I think is tricky.
Especially because there's no film. But like that's the power of Pat, right? Is that there's no film on you because nobody wants to throw at you, and nobody really wants to look your way, because it's just that stat that we read a while ago keeps popping up, where it was like I think it was quarterbacks will have a better completion if they literally threw the ball at the ground than they did throwing at Pat this year. And Patrick Peterson, when I saw him at radio, where he brought up that same stat, because that stat is ridiculous. Like, it's the fact that, like you said, like when you don't have film, you're a little nervous because you're like, we can't show how dominant he is. But the fact that there's no film is the fact that he's so dominant, which is ironic and sometimes to look at it that way.
And like when you win it so early, I'm not saying that he's guaranteed to ever win it again, but like, say Pat plays, 10 more years or whatever, like
fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed, exactly. Like, but great corners can play a while. And he's only 24, So let's say he plays another 8 to 10 years or whatever, and he hasn't said anything about how long he wants to play, so just kind of speculating there. But like, if he were to somehow have another one of these seasons now, because he did this so early, it's not like he has to win them back to back, but like if over the next 5, 6, 7 years he were to win another one, he puts himself like right up there with some of the greatest to ever do it, to win Defensive Player of the Year multiple times. So he's put himself in a really good spot, and excited to see what he does moving forward. And now, when I not to keep plugging our content, but I did a story with Champ, with Aqib Talib, Chris Harris, Louis Wright, and one of the quotes that, or some of the quotes that didn't make the story, were about, hey, what's next for Pat? And guys like Chris and Aqib, who won a Super Bowl here, said, like, to take the next step, you got to win. And you got to get in the playoffs a lot. And you got to find a way to go get a ring. And as we were talking to Pat down there right after he won, he was like, I want to be back down at Super Bowl week, playing in Super Bowl week, and that's the goal now.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. And as fun as the festivities are for Super Bowl week and NFL honors and all that stuff, the game is the ultimate goal, and being there and, hosting the Lombardi. And, we joked with Pat a little bit, because when he saw the video of his coaches, teammates, who really did a good job holding in this secret for him, as they made a special congratulations video for him, which you guys can also see on our social pages and on DenverBroncos.com. He joked that he's like, you guys almost got me. I almost got teary-eyed, and he like joked because he doesn't show that kind of emotion. But I told him, I was like, Pat, I think if you win a Super Bowl, you're going to cry. And he's like, we'll see. It's just like, I want him to get to that moment, because that pinnacle of, like you said, like that next step. And I think it's really exciting for Broncos country right now, because like you said, they were the kind of the talk of the town going into Radio Row, and not only with legends, but with other people from other teams. We walked around and talked to a few guys from different teams, different divisions and conferences. And we asked them just about Pat. We asked them about different things. And they're just like, yeah, like what the Broncos did this year is very impressive. And everyone, I think, has their eyes, kind of looking to see what happens in free agency, what happens in the draft and things like that. But they're in a position that really does help out these young stars. Like you said, Pat's only 4 years in. There's a lot of time to add these key pieces to get things going. You know, you have Bo Nix, who had an amazing year. You sign a couple key guys that are going to be really pillars for your franchise. So I think it's trending in the right direction. Like you mentioned, like it's only year 4 for him. It's only year 3 for Marvin Mims, who's gone to 3 Pro Bowls in a row. So I think you have these young guys that are really building something special, and I think it's going to, hopefully lead to the promised land that they're all looking for.
Yeah, and obviously Sean Payton went on Kay Adams' show and said, we're going to be a problem. And we haven't heard from him directly. He did a couple of media interviews out there, but not a ton. But I think that sentiment is one that is kind of shared around the league, especially
I like
from
the attitude.
Yeah,
I
of course.
like it.
You got to have that. It goes from
Swagger.
being like young and hungry to like, hey, let's now expect more.
Yeah.
I think. And obviously the Chiefs are in the AFC West. They just had a tough Super Bowl. I don't think anyone in Broncos country was torn up watching that performance on Sunday.
Yeah.
But I think there's this sentiment now, and I saw it on Twitter a little bit of like, can the Broncos go get the division? Like, are they like, do the Chiefs take a little bit of a step back, and can the Broncos surge forward? Obviously the Chargers were a playoff team as well. This is going to be a brutal division, a tough division. Pete Carroll.
The Raiders are trying to gear up for trying to make some kind of run.
Yeah, to get back in it. And but I do think if you said to me 2 years ago, like as the Broncos were, or like at the end of 22, that Broncos would find their quarterback and they'd be maybe in position to make a run at the division, I would have said, man, a lot of stuff needs to happen for that to be the case. And the Broncos have kind of like, listen, we'll have everyone covered every step of the way here with combine preview, free agency, draft, OTAs. Like, we're going to be here all off season long. But I think big picture, there is this hope and possibility of like, can the Broncos add some pieces? And we heard Sean Payton on Kay Adams' show as well mention, finding a joker. He mentioned inside linebacker, safety, kind of talked about the interior of the defense. And so obviously DJ Jones will be a free agent. And so, what do you do in the middle of the defensive line? But if you can address these pieces and the Broncos are no longer in as bad shape salary cap wise as they were a year ago,
right.
They've got draft picks. I think it's the first time since 2021 that they've had a first and second round pick in a draft. But it's been a while here. So like you've got this full array of ways to go get guys. And I do think that if you can add some weapons, if you can shore up the defense a little bit, maybe get a little stronger at certain positions, there's no reason that you can't go from 10 wins to like, even, I don't want to like go crazy here in February, but like 12 or 13 and like be in the conversation for a division title. And we heard Sean Payton after the loss in Buffalo say, we got to host these games, right? Yeah. And so that's got to be the goal all year, is winning the division. We heard Greg Penner say that at the end of the year, of the ultimate goal is winning the division. And I do think that the Broncos are not as far away as like, I wouldn't even say like as people think, because I think people do think they're pretty close.
They're starting to think that way for sure.
But it's going to be exciting because it is truly within their grasp. And listen, as long as Patrick Mahomes is there, the Chiefs are going to be in it.
It's going to be a problem.
It's not going to be, the Chiefs are not going to go 5-12. They're not going to just fall off. But when you have Bo Nix and Sean Payton, and even when you have Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert over there in LA, like it's going to be a battle for this division, I think, moving forward, which is exciting to see.
I prefer that. I prefer all 4 teams in the division to like really kind of
I would prefer if the Broncos were really good and the other teams were really bad.
I like the competition. I like it because then there's no narrative of, it's because you're in a weak division. It's like, no, like it's the best of the best going. Like you said, I think what's really exciting about Bo Nix and this young core, it's like they're up for the challenge. And I think being able to turn this franchise around, there's a lot of pride in that. Like you mentioned, being here when Pat wins Defensive Player of the Year and, down the line being able to look back. it's going to be really exciting being down the line, looking back and be like, wow, we were there during the literally turn of the franchise as they kind of go on to that next step. And I think that's really exciting given everything that's happened over the last few years and where this team is now kind of surging towards. I think is really exciting, again, with head coach Sean Payton and Bo Nix, and kind of like this new culture of just we're going to focus on us, but we're also going to win in the process, and you guys can all,
Yeah.
you can all witness it.
I think the other, like, people, if people are listening to this and they're like, oh, they're not that close to the Chiefs. The Chiefs have made 3 Super Bowls in a row. They won 2 in a row. Like, I get that, but I think when you look at the results last year, which is that when the Broncos won for the most part, they tended to blow teams out.
Yeah.
They didn't have a lot of one possession wins, right? I think, and I'm kind of doing this off the top of my head as I look back, I think the win over the Jets was the only game the Broncos won by one possession. The rest of the games, they won almost all of them by double digits.
Yeah.
And so the games that they won, they were really convincing. And so I always, and we've talked about this before, I like to play the hits. I like to say the same things every season. One of the things I look at is one-score games, right? And like those tend to go back and forth. And if you're really good in one-score games one year, you're probably going to, you might not go from like the Chiefs going 9-0 or whatever they were in one-score games, 11-0 to 0-11, but you're probably going to go closer to 7-4 or 6-5, whatever.
It's going to balance out a little more. Hopefully.
Exactly. The Broncos, though, like all their wins were convincing, and so you would expect to kind of keep wins over those types of teams, the kind of either the teams at the bottom of the league or the, like around kind of the middle of the league. The teams that were competing for playoff spots and were just out of them, for the most part, Denver took care of business against. When you look at Denver's losses last year, they were almost all one-score games. Yeah. The Ravens game, I think, was the only one that was not one score. A couple of them, like the Chargers at home. At home, like the Broncos had to make a late surge. So, it wasn't like it was a one-score game for most of the game. Yeah. But those are the games where, hey, the Broncos, I think it was 6 one-score losses. Like, can you get that back to 3-3? And if that's the case, now you're looking at 13-4, 12-5. And so that to me is a reason where, and a really good indicator that like this team can do it again. They can add some pieces and compete. Obviously, their loss to the Chiefs was by 2 points and came down to a blocked field goal. Yeah. Both their losses to the Chargers were one score. So like, I don't see this as a fantasy or far-fetched. I kind of look at the results from last year, think the Broncos are only going to be better because they're going to add better players, and let's see if we can get some of those one-score losses to move back toward Denver's side, and then that's where you can end up with 12, 13 wins.
Before we get out of here, like you said, we have a lot coming up. I'm really excited. NFL Combine, never been. I've covered it from afar. Yes, I've covered it from afar. For those that don't know, I worked at the league at the Shield, as they say, for a while, but I never went to Combine. It's so cold.
It can be cold, yeah. I haven't looked at the weather yet, but
exciting.
Yeah, we'll go be out there, and obviously we'll hear from Sean Payton, George Payton. I would assume we have the last couple of years, and then get to hear from some of these players, and whether it's obviously Ashton Genty is a guy that's been mentioned a lot. Loveland from Michigan, the tight end, Tyler Warren. Some great defensive players as well. So we'll have kind of where we start diving into the draft coverage, and it's trickier when you're at pick 20 and you're not sure. Like,
there's so many scenarios I can imagine. Like
last year, we weren't like positive we were going to try to get a quarterback, but I think the sentiment was like a quarterback is likely. And so you don't know when and you don't know who, but like. I knew if I prepped these, basically got ready for everybody like Caleb Williams, right? Because you knew he was going one. Right. And so you kind of knew like what you were looking for. This year, like you could go tight end, you could go running back, you could go wide receiver, you could go safety, defensive line, linebacker. Like there's a lot of different spots they could go in the first round. And so it makes it exciting in the lead up to the draft. And we'll kind of get started on that coverage in just a couple of weeks here. We'll be back with more of a preview of the Combine next week, some names that people can watch. But, it's It just ended, but it's already starting again. That's the beauty of the NFL is they dominate the entire year.
Yeah, they do. The NFL Combine is Thursday, February 27th. It runs through March 2nd. And I think this is one of the most exciting times, I think, for me, because you look at, like, this is where their story begins. And honestly, if I'm, coming into the league and as a rookie and this is my, combine and my draft class, now when you look at this Broncos team, not only do you look at the way that they're on an upswing, a legendary head coach, a winning season, really turn on the franchise, legends coming back to really kind of mentor these young guys. But I think you kind of see how these young rookies were able to stand out this season, right? And get playing time and, get their time to prove themselves on the field. Like, you have the Troy Franklins, and you have the Jonah Ellises of the team, and being able to really find your groove. Devon Vele was another guy that really kind of showed his colors. And I think that's really exciting for this team to almost like you said, want to play for this franchise and come to this franchise. And I think that's really exciting. And I always credit this to Orlando Franklin that he said it on the Broncos Weekend show that we did every week. He said, the Broncos are now becoming that destination team where people are kind of looking like, I want to go to that party. I want to be invited. I want to go over there. And that's really fun to watch, especially these young stars are going to come into the league.
Yeah, you can kind of tell where your team is based on combine interviews. Mm-hmm. When I first started going to the combine, every edge rusher, you'd ask which player do you pattern your game off? And they'd all say Von Miller. And seriously, Von Miller. And so I'd always have an easy story to write, 2018 group of rushers once, patterning themselves after Von Miller. And then Von left and there wasn't that guy, right? Mm-hmm. And then last year it was back to corners being Pat is the guy that I watch. Pat's the best. Pat's who I pattern my game after. And so you can kind of tell, where is your team from a talent perspective based on these young guys coming in? Are they watching them? Do they want to be like them? Yeah. I can guarantee it'll be the same way. If you ask corners this year, they'll say Pat again. And I would imagine that there's some quarterbacks coming in that'll say that about Bo. And so that's where it's exciting when people are paying attention and guys coming in the league, like you said, they want to play for that team. They want to play with these guys. They want to be like these guys. And it's an important draft class. You can't just, all the progress the Broncos made this last season, you've got to keep stacking. You can't just have a draft class that misses, or you've got 2 or 3 guys that don't pan out. You've got to continue to hit. And we've seen, George Payton over the kind of the tenure that he's been here find success with those guys. Obviously, he's now made 2 first-round picks. Pat Surtain, Bo Nix. Pretty good.
Also finding those gems in the bottom of the draft. Yeah, that's really important too.
It definitely is. I just think the Broncos haven't, because of the Russell Wilson trade, and then of course they gave up a first-round pick to get Sean Payton, which was more than worth it. Right. But to some degree, you've missed having that top end blue chip caliber talent on the roster, and now's over the next couple of years is the chance to re-add those type of young, really good players. We talked all year, Surtain was the only first-round pick on the defense. Yep. And the fact they were able to do that with only 1 first-round pick is amazing. Mm-hmm. But now imagine if you could add, whether it's the offense or the defense, add another star Pro Bowl type player. Mm-hmm. That's really exciting, but it's important that they hit on it, and we'll be there to cover it as they get going. Yeah,
and you had mentioned, yes, Pat was the only first-rounder, but also that draft class worked out pretty well because Quinn Miners was also in that draft class, I believe, and I believe Cooper. No, was Cooper? No, Jonathan Cooper was in that draft class as well. So, as I said, you've been hitting gold recently, and like I said, whether it's from the first round or kind of the latest round, you've been able to find these guys that really come in and produce. So I'm really excited. Again, the NFL Combine is Thursday, February 27th through March 2nd. We will be there in the cold, bringing you all the latest. Really excited to kind of head out there and see what's next for this Broncos franchise. So again, I'm your team reporter and host, Elisa Hernandez. Across the table, as always, is our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla, who has also just gone to every Super Bowl ever, just dropping that flag.
I'm not going to the game until the Broncos are playing. I told Pat that.
I appreciate this.
He said, "Are you going to the game?" I said, "I'm not going until you go."
Mic drop.